Welcome to the Veterinary Project Podcast, episode 052.
Welcome to the show created by vets featuring absolutely no pets. This is the Veterinary Project Podcast, hosted by Dr. Michael Bugg and Dr. Jonathan Light. Our resident veterinarians have swapped out their stethoscopes in favor of microphones to bring you the Veterinary Project Podcast, a show focused on real conversations, aimed to connect this amazing profession full of remarkable people. Through the sharing of collective stories and wisdom, and connecting over the many unique challenges we face, we invite you to join our community of veterinary professionals leading intentional lives. And now, here are the hosts of the Veterinary Project Podcast, Dr. Michael Bugg and Dr. Jonathan Light.
Welcome back to the Veterinary Project Podcast. You are joined by Dr. Michael Bugg and Dr. Jonathan Light. How are you doing, Mike?
Doing well, Jonathan. It was great to see you. Just got back from your neck of the woods. So now,
yes, sir. You need to tell all of the audience what happened this last weekend, because we were pretty darn happy and proud.
Well, I had a beer with Jonathan Light in person.
That's not what I'm talking about. But though that was a lot of fun, and you might have been a little tired for some reason that I think we need to talk about.
Yeah. Well, I was out there for a national ball hockey tournament. So I was on Team Saskatchewan and we managed to win. So that was very exciting. I've been playing ball hockey for over a decade and we've never won at that level. So yeah, national championship. The body is extremely sore following that.
It was really cool. I was really, it was pretty cool to see gentlemen that are, what's the minimum age in that master's category? 35?
I think 36. You can have 36 or 36 plus year olds, and then the rest are 40 plus.
Okay. And then the rest are 40 plus. And the excitement and the happiness that you saw on your teammates as you guys won 3-2 in a clincher was pretty awesome to see. And my wife and I were talking about this, that there's not many times in our lives at this stage where you're into deep competition and you're winning on that level. It was awesome to see. And it was a full pack crowd too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was a long time coming. A lot of guys on our team, I mean, we've been playing, like I said, over a decade, and it has been a battle. You know, we've been to that tournament in the men's division many, many times and had not very good results, to put it like politely, you know. So it's been a building process and just keep coming back and working. I had been training very hard for that tournament, and yeah, that was genuine. Everyone smiling like that.
Sure was. And I look up to you for that, Mike. And actually, you and I haven't even chatted about this. I'm now thinking, what can I get into competition for? Because I loved competition back in the day. Haven't been in it for a while. You know, business in a sense is competition, not in an adversarial way, but in a growth way. But how can I get into sport again in a different way? You made me start thinking about this last weekend.
Yeah, and that tournament, by winning that, we kind of punched our ticket now to go to Worlds in the Czech Republic in 2022. And I was chatting about this with Rosalie a bit on the drive home, and it's like putting it in perspective. Like this is still just ball hockey, right? Like there's many, many, many things that are more important in life than ball hockey, but it gives me something to focus on, right? So now for the next year, just in my like health garden of my life, obviously I want to be healthy for longevity and to be around for my family and whatnot. But this just gives you that extra edge of this is what you're driving for. And for me, I need that, you know, I need something to focus on. So I appreciate it for that.
Yep. I agree. Well, that's great. We've got ourselves a really good episode today.
Well, one second here. Let's hear about what you've been up to. You were in, I don't even actually know where it was, but after I saw you late last week, you were heading to a manager summit, or you were hosting a manager summit.
Yeah, that's correct. Sorry, I jumped the gun there. Yes, we had our first manager summit in the, I don't know what we're going to call this phase of the COVID pandemic. We had everybody together, and man, you come out of there energized. We had 3 days. We had some dinners. We had some talks. We had some learning, some pieces. You know, Becky Taylor was on our podcast recently. She ran a 3-hour group session with us on conflict. how to handle conflict, how to approach conflict, which was a great conversation. We spoke about where we are in our business. So this is through Mosaic Veterinary Partners. We talked about our core skills and then looked at team retention, talked about budgets and all things income statements. It's funny, I was typing or texting back and forth with a colleague, and he's going, well, how come I wasn't invited? I was going, this is only for our group. And we've had a couple of new clinic managers on board, one of which I got to travel with last night. And as opposed to her thinking pre-manager summit, this was going to be a boring 8 hours of lecture and presentation. It was anything but. So you come away from those energized. I've got a 2-hour plan tomorrow to sit through and talk about next steps so that we start to execute on the discussions that we had. And yeah, you have one energized gentleman right now.
And that's your wheelhouse. You love getting around people, and that just fires you up.
That's correct. Yep. So now it's taking all of those ideas, suggestions, pain points, and taking the next steps with our leaders within our company.
Nice.
Really excited about it.
Nice.
Yes. But that's not what our listeners are talking or want to listen to today. They want to listen to the Derm Vet. But before we get into that, just because we keep teasing it forward, Mike, what's our quick tip today?
Okay, our quick tip for today is an audiobook that I was listening to, Rosalie and I were listening to on the drive home. And so it is How to Talk So Little Kids Will Listen. And I mean, we're only a couple chapters into the book, and this jumped in my mind when we were chatting here with Ashley late in our podcast discussion, and we were talking about setting expectations, and it reminded me of this book. And then thinking about how I'm speaking to Riley, and sometimes the little kids are just so frustrated. And then in classic, you just say the wrong thing and it just fires them up even more. So a really good start to the book. I'm assuming it's going to continue through. So that's my quick tip for today. If you have little kids in your life, How to Talk So Little Kids Will Listen. Check it out.
We hadn't planned for this in the setup for this episode. We have that paperback at home, and I pull it out every couple of months because I've made some mistake in exactly what you've described and need to go back to the basics. And every time I go back to that book, and it's a little bit of an older book too, just resets you. Great quick tip.
Well, and it's like some of the stuff is very obvious when you hear it or read it, but you just don't do it. And it's classic in life. It's, lots of things are really simple and easy to do. You just got to remember to do them.
And the rational versus the emotional brain. And when that lizard brain kicks in, yes. Excellent. Moving on. A bio for our guest today, the Derm Vet. So the Derm Vet, her name is Dr. Ashley Bourgeois, and she is a board-certified veterinary dermatologist, passionate about providing practical knowledge to general practitioners to help itchy pets. She completed her bachelor's degree at Iowa State University and graduated from the University of Missouri's College of Veterinary Medicine in 2010. She then completed a 1-year small animal internship at Purdue, and then upon finishing her internship, she accepted a residency position with the Animal Dermatology Clinic's Tustin, California's location in 2011. She became a Diplomate of the American College of Veterinary Dermatology in 2014. Her and her family moved to Portland, Oregon in 2016 to help expand the company, and she is now an owner within the company and sits on the board of directors. She has a strong interest in autoimmune skin diseases, allergies, cytology, and otology. In her leisure time, Dr. Bourgeois enjoys outdoor activities, traveling, and watching sports. She and her husband stay busy with their daughter, son, and rescue dog. Dr. Bourgeois is passionate about educating veterinarians in dermatology and work-life integration through her podcast, lecturing, and social media presence known as the Derm Vet. In this conversation, we have a wide-ranging topic of choices to deal with related to how she got into becoming a dermatologist and the why behind it, moving to Portland and actually taking an active role as an owner and on the board of directors and discussing what that actually looks like behind the scenes. And then we move into her social media presence, the why behind it, and she has some great gems for us to share on today's episode. So therefore, without further ado, Dr. Ashley Bourgeois. Ashley, thank you very much for joining us this morning. This is a conversation, a long time coming, quite excited. A little bit of background for our listeners. Mike and I, we were on social media, and we were going, who has a presence on social media that we're both interested in, follow. And when Mike had said he'd reached out to the Derm vet, I'm like, yes, I am taking this one on. And in terms of introductions and making it happen. So we're a couple of months later. It's a pleasure to have you on, Ashley.
Oh, well, I'm super happy to be here and thankful you guys asked. And I have to thank you guys. Maybe the Canadian Nice came out, but you guys were very flexible because I know my schedule didn't make it easy, but we are here and I'm very excited.
Well, from our pre-talk, we know we're going to have a fun conversation here today. And a place I would love to start, Ashley, is just a little bit about your journey to becoming a dermatologist. If you are a veterinarian in GP practice and you say dermatology, there is this breach here, and 90% of the breach over here is like, run away. I don't want to see it. I hate it. I don't know what to do. It's going to take so long. And then there's the other 10%. They're like, I love it. I want it. It's gross. It's amazing. How did you get to become a dermatologist?
Well, I will totally agree with you there. It seems like with general practitioners, when I lecture and try to teach, it's totally divided. Either it's, I never want to see a derm case, or derm nerds like me that absolutely love it. I fell in love with dermatology pretty early. It was actually my first year of vet school. I didn't go in knowing, I actually didn't really know much about specialty medicine, to be honest. But when I went into vet school, I figured I would do mostly small animal, maybe a little bit of equine. And my first year, I just fell in love with the science of it. I always joke that it was an anesthesiologist who got me interested in it, because he made a presentation just about different specialties and different things you could do with a veterinary degree. And he said, if I could do it all over again, I'd be a dermatologist, because I would be done by 5. I would have no emergencies and nothing would die. And that's not why I did it. It's a nice perk. But I just love the science. I'm a very visual person. I'm a very relational person. I love relationships. I love networking. I love being involved with people. So having a specialty that's visual, that I mostly have to deal with these patients their whole lives once they come to see me, and I really get to know my clients, is truly why I fell in love with it. And so pretty much once I realized those things were enveloped in this specialty, I was pretty sure I was going to do dermatology by the end of my first year.
Wow.
Yeah.
Histology didn't throw you off.
No, I like it. I like histo. I do. I love reading, like learning about biopsies and stuff like that. I kind of one of those people, I really can find an appreciation for most things. Like I really liked oncology. I liked medicine. I am personally not a surgery person, but I enjoy watching it. Like I enjoy helping. I don't know that I would want to be responsible for surgery. But I really am just the type of person that for most things, I like to be a sponge and find lots of things fascinating. But that's probably why I'm so passionate about my specialty and doing all of these things, is I want other people to appreciate it as well.
And we're going to get into that related to your digital and your social media presence, which is the first way that I was introduced to you. I think it was on Instagram probably about a year ago. And I went, wait a second, this is pretty cool. And I don't even super love dermatology.
Perfect. That's exactly what I'm going for. So thank you.
That's what it was. There was pictures, and then you followed up with some videos. I'm like, I can watch this. And then I'm the classic person that has never put a comment on your message board.
Oh, that's okay. Trust me. I get plenty of DMs. So it's okay.
Before we go down that road, so you went and you did your internship, and then straight away you then went into your residency. Is that correct?
Yes, I am definitely, anyone who knows me is not surprised. I am a head down, go through, get it done type person. So I went, but I knew what I wanted to do. So I think, that's a bit different. I think there's actually a lot of benefit to going to general practice. The person I work with, my fellow dermatologist colleague, she went to general practice for a while. So I actually think there's a lot to be said for that. But I just was very laser focused because I knew that's what I wanted to do. So I went straight into my internship. I did that at Purdue, so it was academic, and then got my residency in private practice with the company I'm with now, Animal Dermatology Clinic. I was in Southern California for a while, and then now I'm up here in Portland, Oregon, like with the same company. So it's cool because I feel like I've really gotten to see a lot of different things between academic training, private practice training, and now we have our own resident that we're training. So it's kind of a full circle moment.
Let me jump into that for a second, because there is a lot of questions that come up. Should I do a private residency? What will that entail? Will that hold me back in the future, etc.? You had done your internship at Purdue, so you got a taste of the academic side. Why jump to the private for your residency? Was that a choice? Was that just availability? Dermatology is a very hard residency to get into. Tell us a little bit about that for our listeners that may be looking to go down one of those roads.
It's a great question. I am a believer that there are good private practice internships and private practice residency, and there are bad ones. I'm also a believer there are good academic internships and residencies, and there are bad ones. And that varies between specialties, that varies between your goals. My residency, I applied to both. So I was pretty open. I really dug into I didn't apply to necessarily all of them, but really dug into what certain programs had to offer. So that was more happenstance. For dermatology, I am really thankful I ended up where I did with my private practice residency. We also have a private practice residency that's super well established. We have several clinics throughout the company. It's almost like a hybrid, to be honest, of private practice and academic, because there's a lot of research. There's a lot of people involved in the College of Dermatology itself. There's people that author a lot of things. So I felt pretty fortunate I ended up with that institution. I think it kind of comes down to what your goals are, honestly. For me, I obviously love teaching. Like I love teaching, I love lecturing, I do all this extra stuff by choice, but I want to teach people who want to learn. So for me, I thought that it could be kind of intimidating to end up in an academic situation where people had to go through it and they didn't really care about dermatology. But again, there's pros and cons to both. But for me, like high caseload, really being able to get my eyes on things because I learn by doing. That is just how I am, which is probably why derm is good because I can touch and feel like the organ I deal with. So it ended up being the perfect place for me. But I really strongly believe that there's good and bad on both sides.
Excellent. So then taking that a step further, you finish your residency, you maintain with the same company, and now you're an owner within the company. Tell us about that. Because when I read that and I was doing some research in regards to this podcast setup, I went, wow, here's a person that's been with the same company all the way through, has taken ownership in it. Is that something that Ashley, you wanted to do? Is that something where you saw yourself moving towards?
Yes. Yeah, essentially. I knew really quickly, again, to a fault, I have that mindset where I kind of like, what's the next step? I mean, that is probably the overachiever in me, as a lot of veterinarians are, is like, what's next? How can I help? That's just ingrained in me, almost to a fault where I need people like my husband to tell me, hey, it's okay. Like, you don't have to do everything. So it's great to be very, achievement based like that. But as a person who is like that, you have to have people in your life that tell you, it's cool. Like you don't have to do everything. You don't have to, always be the next step, like thinking of that. So I think as I've gotten older, I am definitely learning now with my, balancing, having two young kids and that. So it's great, but you do have to have people in your life that reel you in a bit. But the ownership, we again have several clinics. So I'm really fortunate that I get to essentially, I'm a shareholder. I own within the clinic. I was very fortunate to be voted to the board of directors, but we have a management group. So I own within the company, but it's a special situation because it's not like I have to sit there and, do the books every night. My responsibility is to help guide the direction of the company from our medical standpoint. So it's really cool because I get I feel like I get the best of both worlds. So I don't want people to think like I'm just the owner of everything and I sit there and like involved with taxes and all this crazy stuff. It's more like we're shareholders within the company. Like we buy in, we have faith the company is going to do well. We work hard to allow the company to grow. We network to get other people to want to be in within the company. We meet quarterly with our CEO just to help provide guidance and advice of, what we'd like to see as being the people on the ground. But I am not doing accounting, like I am not doing all those things. We have a group. So I think it's important for people to realize that, it's different than being a sole owner of a practice. Like you might have a practice manager, but that would be more direct responsibility. So it's an exciting thing and I'm really proud of it. But I also like to be real with people because sometimes we see this facade of, well, they do all these things and like, that's incredible, but I have help. Like it's not just me that's doing it.
And that was one of my questions for you. In having that help, are there places now as you have taken this next step and you've been an owner for a little while that you enjoy doing in that capacity versus enjoy doing?
Yeah, I love this version of it. Like I am not one that just wants to go to work my hours, leave and be done. I think it's fabulous if people want to do that. I think that's the really nice thing is we're not all meant to do practice ownership. We're not all meant to be full-time. We're not all meant to be even clinical. Like you really get to find what works for you. Just because someone decides they want to take that path doesn't mean everyone has to take that path. Like I truly believe the doctors that want to just go work their hours and go home and be done that's fantastic. Like that's great. We want people to be in things in our field that keep them going. And if that separation is what keeps you going and keeps you sane and healthy, that's wonderful. I am personally not wired like that. I am one that's always like doing all this other stuff like ownership. And, I know we're going to talk about all the other social media stuff. People don't realize that that keeps me passionate. Like that keeps me fueled. That gives me something else to learn, to understand. So it's not so much I do it because I just want the accolades. Like that is truly what gets me excited. Like I love doing the clinic work, but the whole time I'm at the clinic, I'm like, okay, so how could we do better at this? How could we be more efficient? That's a cool picture. I could put this in my lecture. Like the balance of those two worlds are what actually keep me really interested and passionate and not burning out.
That's so great. And I think a lot of people need to hear that message. There's so much variety within veterinary medicine. We sometimes get stuck in our own little lane and not even forget, we just don't see sometimes. If you've been in the same clinic doing the same thing for the last 5 years, you only see this when there's so much more available. And again, that to me lends to the idea on social media. I'm not a dermatologist, don't play in the dermatology sandbox at all. And yet here's this person that's the derm vet. And I went, what is this? Start following your Instagram and then went, wait, there's something here to it. And there again is an opening of capacity, making me feel more comfortable in the cases I'm seeing come back into practice. Tell us a little bit about why you've gone down that journey. You have a large social media presence. When I then looked at your speaker engagement and how many speaking, even within COVID functions you've been at, you're a busy lady. Tell us a little bit about that journey.
Yeah. I'm busy. I like to say we're all busy. Like it just kind of depends on what you decide to be busy at, right? The world of COVID has obviously presented a lot of virtual things. So a lot of webinars, a lot of podcast recordings, which is great because I get to really teach and experience these things. But my husband's been very excited that I have not been traveling as much with our 2 young kids. So that will be an interesting transition when that comes back. But, it's really for me, what it came down to was it was a couple years ago that really the derm vet started. Actually, we're almost exactly about the 2-year mark. And I just really wanted to help. Like I'm just a person that I'm really passionate about our field. A lot of the things in our field of the burnout and the struggle and the suicide, like all of that stuff just really breaks my heart because I've always been really passionate. But I think it's just because I am very confident I'm where I'm supposed to be. And that's not, some people, they don't find that right away. So I think there's just so many things we can do in our field. So as I wanted to really help our field, I was getting asked to speak more and more at in-person conferences, and I loved it. I loved it. I just loved being, I'm, a creative person. I loved creating presentations. I loved teaching. I loved learning how other dermatologists explain things. I just loved being better at helping more pets. I knew I could only see so many pets in the clinic I work at in Portland.
Yeah.
But if I can teach you how to be a better dermatologist yourself in the clinic, whether that's when to know to refer, at least to do cytology, at least to identify when that might be an autoimmune disease. From my own experience in vet school, a lot of people wanted to brush off dermatology, or some schools don't even have dermatologists. So you might get 1 week of a locum dermatologist who lectures to you, and then that's it. But then you go to general practice and it's 40 to 50% of what you do. And then you're kind of learning based on what other people do. And you might not feel like you have as much education as you should. So that's where the derm vet became a passion of mine. Is okay, if I, as a busy person, as a mom, personally, for me, when I had my second child, I knew I would still travel, that I would still lecture because I love to do that. But I knew not everyone could do that. Or maybe you could go to 1 or 2 conferences a year if it's not actually your, part of your job, like it is for me. So then I said, well, how can I get this information out there? How can I at least get vets to cytology? How can I at least teach them how to do that? How can I teach them how to use an otoscope appropriately? How can I give them more confidence? But I can only speak to, a few hundred, maybe 500 people each lecture I give, even at a big conference. And so social media is everywhere. So it kind of came into, well, derm is very visual. My clients are super excited when I want to share like pictures of their pet's progress. And so I started sharing, and it just kind of organically grew from there. I don't know what I'm doing. I think that's really important for people to know. I'm a hot mess mom. I barely feel like I hold on to what I'm doing. I have help. I fail at a lot of things, but I'm just willing to try. And so eventually, as that kept going, I realized the other thing that was very accessible was podcasting. So just like you guys are doing, I obviously don't have a problem talking, which is why I'm love public speaking. And so I just said, well, look, I'm just going to try it. And I will be honest with you, I put it off for months because I didn't know what I was doing. I'm not a technologically advanced person at all. And so I finally just said, I've had this microphone in my Amazon cart for like a month or two. I'm just going to buy it. Like, I just need to go. And it was like, I think I was still like, my son was like 5 months old. I think I just like finished nursing. It was like midnight. And I'm like, just buy it. Just buy it. Like, stop it. Get out of your own head. So I did. And it just, it's the first few episodes are kind of rough with audio. I'm still like learning what I'm doing, even a year and a half into it. But it's really gained ground and I love to do it. So that was a super long answer to your question, but that's kind of like naturally how it happened. And it's been super organic. I have not grown the fastest by any means compared to some people, but I have loved doing it. And so I'm okay, just making sure I love doing it so I don't burn out and won't stop doing it.
Actually, I love that answer.
Good. I was like, whoa, I'm going here.
And I'm not stopping you. There's vulnerability in there. Hot mess mom. Haven't heard that yet in any of our podcasts. You're on the same journey as us, and I hear the same evolution, but I also hear the same confidence in wanting to continue to do something that you are really enjoying, and not just putting social media and having the most followers and the most likes as the most important piece. To me, when I read and I look at your social media presence, it's about providing value to those that may not be so inclined to be the best dermatologists out there, and provide stories of success, just like you spoke for your clients. And I think that was one of the draws for me, and I'm sure it is one of the draws for the thousands of others that are out there. We don't know what we're doing. We make it up on the fly. There are professionals out there, but nobody on this podcast right now went to school for that specific marketing, technology aspect of what we're doing, but we're still going out there. So I really I commend you for that.
Thank you. Yeah. But I think that's really, it's important to see that people who are doing things and might be successful in things still have doubt, still wonder, like, I've had doubt, like, for everything, for, am I a good public speaker? Like, do people care about my podcast? So there is totally doubt, and it's important for people to see that. I mess up things all the time. I have cases, even as a specialist, that don't go well. I have clients who get mad because I can't fix their pets. Like, it is important to be real, because none of us are perfect at this at all.
So let's take that a step further. As a driven A-type individual, when you do fail in that regard, and I'm calling it fail when it's not really a fail, how do you pick yourself back up?
You know, community is super important for me. It's easier now, have just kind of accepted it's going to happen. Like we were joking before we got on here that I'm showing up here just like a mess, like just got done, like working out, walking the dog, and here we are. Like, you just have to find out what you're willing to let go of. And for me, authenticity is something that is really important to me. Being really authentic with people, just not being perfect, but I am a recovering perfectionist. So that's really difficult. And I will say the two things that have helped me with that, honestly, is just age and experience. Maybe it is now having two kids that I just know I am not going to have the cleanest house. I am not going to succeed at everything. Sometimes we're lucky just to get to the end of the day, and that's okay. But community, you have to have community that you can relate to. And I can speak to this mostly from the mom aspect, where I am absolutely not an expert at all. And just having people where I'm like, is this normal? Like, I feel bad. I snapped at my child. I feel bad. Like, I just had to take a break. And having people that say, me too. Like, yep, totally normal. So having people, and I have pockets of people, right? So we talked about Tanasia earlier. So Tanasia Crocker and I were very similar people. We have social media presences. We love lecturing. We're both very passionate working moms of two. There are certain things where I just have to connect with her about, like, gosh, is this hard for you right now? Oh my gosh, like people I trust. But then I have other people like my next door neighbor, who's a mom of a boy very similar to mine, where just on day-to-day mom stuff, we might be like, wow, like toddlers can be nuts. And that's okay. So you have pockets of people that and then my husband, right? I bounce everything off him. So I think you have to have people you're willing to be vulnerable with, that you're okay saying, I'm upset about this. I tried really hard and it didn't work, because you need that outlet. So I would say experience and community are the two things that have taught me to be more comfortable with being confident in what I'm doing, even if it doesn't always turn out perfect.
It's fantastic. In the ideal world, Ashley, where do you take this? Where do you take what is, in my view, a brand, the Derm Vet, going forward?
Oh, that's a great question. It is something I've mulled over a lot, probably especially the last few months, as we're hopefully flirting the idea with in-person stuff, and we don't know what the world's going to end up with. And for me, I'm trying to get more focused on certain things that I'm doing. I think when it started, I got really excited and I want to do all of these things, but now I really want to focus on some things in particular. So the podcast is really important to me. So I'm really trying to find more opportunities with the podcast to grow it, to provide for people who want to learn, whether it's they can listen when they commute, they can listen when they're doing dishes. So the podcast, I just want to keep growing. I want to keep having more guests on there. I wanted to reach more people. So probably looking at opportunities, and that has lots of different, whether it's sponsorships or just platforms, there's ways to get that out there. That on my social media, and then my online community, the Derm Nerds, which is new and in its infancy, but it's been really fun. I just want to see those really expand and evolve, because my whole ideal plan is that I find other people who love dermatology. And then when we start going back to conferences and traveling, we have that community. And I don't know what that's going to look like. I don't know if it's going to be some happy hours at the big conferences. But I just want people to be as passionate about it as me. So that's my ultimate goal, is to focus on those three things. I would love to eventually do a lot of my own online webinars, where I'm just putting it out there myself, and that's kind of the ultimate goal. But for now, it's about really growing, about being at some of these conferences to see people. And so we'll see.
I like it. Mike, any other questions there? I have completely taken up Ashley's time today.
Well, I have two, and you already touched on one, Ashley. The one thing that jumped out at me listening to you, so achievement based and focused, and I was going to ask you, like, how do you let go? On your website, I see one of your missions is helping people build a career they love. So if they're in a career they don't love, moving out of that, and there can be a lot of fear there, right? And so I know you said community and vulnerability. I'm just wondering, is there any more tactical tips if someone is listening and they're in a place where they maybe don't love what they're doing, but they're struck by a bit of fear, and they don't have the age and experience yet, how can they start moving towards that?
That's a great question, because experience only comes with time. Like, you can't just like snap your fingers and you have like 5 years of experience. So I think it's just get online and look at opportunities, look at what other people are doing. That's the really nice thing about social media. There's lots of veterinarians showcasing tons of things you can do within our field, whether it's emergency or teaching or just doing social media stuff, doing stuff in industry. So you can just go out there and Google it or go online, just like anything. Like, I think sometimes people don't even realize what opportunities are out there. So just go out there and see what even just kind of excites you a little bit. Like, ooh, that's different. I didn't even know that was possible. And then just ask people who are in certain things. I get other dermatologists who ask me about social media, and I will talk to them about what I do, or we'll connect and talk, because the reality is, I would be fine with other dermatologists to be out there doing this, because they might reach other people that they don't jive with me. I'm a really energetic, loud, messy person, and that's not for everybody. And that's fine. Like, if someone else wanted to do it, I'd be all for it. And I know other people doing it. So I think really just ask. Like, people are so concerned about just asking, like, what do you love about this? What other opportunities are out there? And then just try. It's okay to change. That's like one of my biggest pieces of advice is it's okay to change. If you are in a situation and you need to get out, whether it's a different clinic or just a wholly different aspect of our field, and you try that other thing on for 3 months and you realize it is not what you thought it was, it's okay. Like, maybe it's on the path to something else. For example, you guys asked me about my residency. I didn't match at first, to be honest. I didn't match. I'm very vocal about that. I didn't match. My program actually ended up being offered post-match.
Okay.
And guess what happened? It was exactly the program I would have picked if it had been in the match as my first choice. So sometimes there are paths that we can't explain and are really upsetting, like switching and finding out it's not what you thought, but it might be on the journey to something else.
That's so important. And we've had this come up a few times, and I know it's hard for people to have the faith and the confidence, but just trusting that process is leading you, where you need to be, even if there is setbacks.
Yes.
Yeah, agreed.
I have one more question, Jonathan, before I give it back to you.
You did.
I can't let a dermatologist slip through without asking about expectations. So for me, as just a GP, when I was in the exam room, the client comes in and they have a set of expectations around how the appointment is going to go and how the case resolution is going to go. How do you set expectations with your client with cases that are typically long-term or lifelong?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't call yourself just a GP. I think GPs honestly are amazing. People are always like, but you're an expert. I'm like, I'm an expert at one thing. One thing. You know what I'm doing this afternoon? I'm bringing my dog to her own GP appointment because I don't know what anything else about what she needs. I don't know what vaccine she needs. Like, so you guys do. I honestly think your job's harder. Like, I learned how to be really good at one tiny aspect of our industry. But talking about chronic disease and anything, for me, so I would say honesty, plant the seed, having really good follow-up. And that doesn't mean necessarily calling. I understand all general practitioners, all veterinarians, we're all super busy. So that's where handouts, discharge instructions, training your staff to know some of these things so that they can reinforce with your owners become really important. So what I mean by planting the seed is I know as a general practitioner, You guys are not going to have an hour set aside for an initial derm exam like I do. I set an hour aside because we have a lot to go over. It's overwhelming. They've been waiting to get into me. That is their time. So I can go over a lot more stuff, but you guys can plant the seed. So you don't have to go over like, here's what an allergy test looks like. Here's the purpose of immunotherapy. Here's all these things. Say they get an ear infection. Like, we're going to treat this ear infection, but I am concerned there's an underlying reason that that's happening. So, let's treat it. Let's see how things go, but watch out for, say, licking the paws or chewing or scooting or whatever, because I'm concerned there could be an allergy there. Or if we get another ear infection in the future, we need to think about that. So you don't have to feel the pressure of jumping into an allergy spiel like I bore people with, but just plant the seed, and then setting the expectations, just honesty and empathizing. So I have my own allergic dog, and that's actually been super helpful, because when people say like, oh man, it's so frustrating, I'm like, I get it. Me too. Like, I'm a dermatologist and my dog's flaring right now. It's really frustrating when she's licking and chewing and I'm telling her to stop it. So just give people acknowledgement. Like, you're right. It is frustrating. You're right. It is expensive. You're right. Like, I wish that we had a cure. That would be great. That it has a lot of power to people to feel like they're seen, they're acknowledged, and not that we're just brushing them aside. And then I even tell my good rechecks, like, I make it a team effort. So even if I have a recheck that's doing great, I'm like, okay, we're doing great. That's awesome. I am so happy about that. But allergies change, they fluctuate, seasons change, things can progress. So here's the things I want you watching out for, and you need to let me know when that happens. That way it's not shocking to people that if they do great for 3 months and then all of a sudden they're licking their paws again, they're like, well, just wait, we thought we had this under control. So those would probably be my biggest tips: is plant the seed, have really good follow up with things like your discharge instructions to save you time, and then just empathize and be honest with people.
Nice. Well, with that, Ashley, we have to change gears. We're going to move into the impact round, which are a series of short questions for you to be able to answer. And the first question for today is, are you a cat or a dog person?
Oh, dog. Easy. Dog. Dogs are my spirit animal. I am a dog person. Don't get me wrong. I like cats and I love my cat patients, but comparison wise, that is easy.
Easy. We can still be friends.
Okay, sorry. Like I said, I still like cats. We need cat people, but I am for sure a dog person.
That's great. True or false? I knew I wanted to be a vet since I was a kid.
True. I decided in career fair of 5th grade, all of a sudden I realized that could be a career, and I never looked back.
Rolled with it. How would your friends describe what you do for a living?
It depends on who you ask. Some of them had no idea this existed until they met me. I would just probably say, if you ask my daughter, she'd just say she helps itchy pets. Probably mostly just skin veterinarian would be the easy answer most would give. Or some people would say, I'm not sure.
Excellent. What is your favorite hobby?
Oh, man. I would probably say what I love to do and I want to get back into more now as our kids are getting older is, it's easy to say travel. So, but I'd say hiking, like be experiencing things, being in nature, seeing different areas of the world, like truly are what bring me joy. Like, part of wanting to lecture is also being able to travel with that, to have opportunities to see other cool places. So being outside in nature and hiking, that is for sure like one of my ultimate goals to do.
Nice. You live in a great part of the world for that.
Yes. It's part of why we moved here, to be honest, was just nature.
What in this world are you most grateful for?
I think I would just have to be very broad and say relationships. Like, I just really, truly love people. I think that is why the pandemic's been hard for everybody, but going to conferences, seeing people, knowing our neighbors, I am just grateful for relationships. They can be hard and some relationships aren't meant to be, but when you find the ones that, no matter if it's a deep one or a superficial one, that is what I'm most grateful for, are just relationships.
Nice. Great answer. I don't think we've heard that one
like
before either.
Oh, what do other people say? I'm like, I thought that was pretty corny.
Can't tell you. You have to listen to all 50.
Oh, fair enough. Fair enough. That's very good.
So with that, we are coming to a close, Ashley. I was excited to have this podcast. You have had some gems today for our listeners, for Mike and I. We have some learning to do. It was really a pleasure. And yes, I really enjoyed this conversation for sure. Before we come to an end, if there are those that want to reach out, they listen to this podcast and are going, I've never heard of the Derm Vet. Who is this lady? How do they get a hold of you? Where can they get in contact with you?
Yeah, I put very simple. I put everything, didn't have enough time to be creative. So it's all under the Derm Vet. So I'm on Instagram. That's probably where I'm the strongest. It's where I spend the most time and have the most fun with. It's Instagram. It's also on Facebook as the Derm Vet. I have the dermvet.com online, which just kind of puts everything in one centralized location, including being able to sign up for things like the Derm Nerds, the online community. And then the podcast is the Derm Vet podcast. I just went with it. So it's all under one, but yeah, the podcast is one of my favorite things. It just like this, it allows me to network with people. It allows me to have resources for people. If I get asked a question on, social media, I can say, hey, check out this episode. So yeah, it's probably one of the things I'm most proud of.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Mike, any words in closing today?
No, just thank you, Ashley. It was great finally meeting you, chatting with you, up to so many amazing things. So I'm excited to continue watching you grow.
Thank you. I really appreciate you guys having me.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. As always, with all of our guests on the Veterinary Project podcast, we leave the last word to you. What message do you want to leave for the veterinary community?
So I've already talked about how it is okay to change. So I'm going to leave with something else because I think that's really important. It's okay to change. It's okay for us to be different, part-time, full-time, industry, clinical. It is okay for all of us to be different. But one of my favorite things, since we've already gone over that I like to present as words of wisdom is from The Rock. And I don't think he came up with it, but it is where I saw it. And I think it's extremely important. So the quote he put up a while ago I saw was, it's nice to be important, but it's more important to be nice. And I think that goes for everything, whether that's dealing with your staff, whether that's dealing with your clients. That does not mean there's not hard days. It doesn't mean that you can't have bad days. It doesn't mean you can't snap at your 4-year-old like me sometimes, but it's just really important to be nice. It's important to be nice, to veterinary students, to veterinarians, other people that might have different views than you. It's just really important in general. So I leave you with those words from The Rock.
Thank you for listening to the Veterinary Project Podcast. As a recap on behalf of our hosts, the Veterinary Project Podcast will be releasing new episodes weekly, so be sure to tune in as we bring you more conversations aimed at helping you enjoy a life well lived. If you enjoyed what you heard on the show and you want to stay in the know, please like, love, and or subscribe to the podcast on the listening platform of your choosing, as we're available on all the usual suspects. If you know of others that may benefit from these conversations, we'd love it if you please share the show with them, as this will help us grow our community to reach more and more veterinary professionals. Speaking of which, if you are a veterinary professional and would like to get connected with more like-minded individuals who are joining us on this journey, please send an email to the veterinaryprojectpodcast@gmail.com, and we'll invite you to be a part of our private Facebook group. General feedback, requests for information, or perhaps requests to be a guest on the show can also be sent to the Veterinary Project Podcast @gmail.com. Dr. Michael Bugg and Dr. Jonathan Light, thank you for listening to the show, and we'll catch you again next week for another episode of the Veterinary Project Podcast. Bye for now.